hockey, and everybody knows I love hockey. I'm sporting my Courage Caps hat out on our YouTube and our WNST TV channel. This guy sports a suit and a tie most of the time, but he's talking hockey, thinking hockey, sleeping hockey, and living it at the NHL Network and NHL Now. You can watch him in the afternoons and certainly follow him as hundreds of thousands do across North America. He is EJ Radic _NHL out on Twitter and, of course, on the NHL Network. What's going on? It must be cup time, me having you on here to talk about the Capitals and high hopes and expectations, right?
Yeah, it must be that time of year, Nestor. Good to be back with you, and it's got to be an exciting time for Washington Capitals fans. I know that it's been a tough run for especially longtime fans. There's been disappointment, but I think there's a lot of reason for hope and optimism. We'll see how it plays out.
You know, you guys are all too optimistic. I mean, Milbury's got him winning the Cup. I mean, you know, I don't know that there's any other sexier pick, right? I haven't seen a lot of people say I like the Canadians or I like the Rangers or, you know, I like the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, the Capitals, they are a marked team, a marked franchise, and certainly the skid marks going back to Pat LaFontaine and Kelly Rudy are down my back 30 years later. EJ, talk me into how they're going to win the Cup and then navigate this thing the next 8 weeks.
Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, for me, Nestor, the playoffs are always about matchups and injuries, and I say it over and over, but I think it's really true. And so the first thing is you got to be as healthy as you can possibly be. Washington Capitals have been very healthy for most of the season, and they appear to be pretty healthy going to the playoffs, so that's a great thing. Then matchups. Who are you going to be able to avoid along the way? Who are you going to have to go through? You know, in that Metropolitan Division this year, with Pittsburgh, Columbus, Washington really vying for that top spot down the stretch, the thing I looked for was who was going to be able to finish first and avoid what I kind of call a meat grinder of a first-round series with the Capitals, Penguins, and Blue Jackets. Who was going to be in that? The Capitals really got their game to going, you know, really in mid-March, put together a winning streak, got some wins against some of their rivals, and they end up with the top spot. So matchup-wise, yeah, like the Toronto Maple Leafs are a plucky group, and, you know, there's a lot of excitement there, and they've got some great, great young players there, certainly led by Austin Matthews. But the bottom line is this is a much better matchup for the Washington Capitals than having to play either the Penguins or the Blue Jackets in the first round. They should be able to advance by Toronto. And then they will play a weakened opponent, most likely in round two, because I expect the Penguins and Blue Jackets really to go after each other hard. That should be a really long and physical series. So the Washington Capitals should be sitting there in round two against a weakened opponent. And if it is the Penguins, they are already without their top puck-moving defenseman, Chris Letang. So the matchups and the injury situation as we go into it really set up nicely for the Caps.
Well, that's what worries me. I mean, you know, that's what worries me. Look, Trotz has said that, you know, this is for the fans, that they've been carrying this cross 40 years, but it feels like it's been at least 15 for Ovechkin and Backstrom and Holtby, and, you know, for all of these guys who've had this disappointment. I mean, I know Carlson talked about redemption, you know, redemption this year for what happened last year. Part of this was they did get kicked around by Philadelphia. You know, Trotz told me a couple of weeks ago when we did our charity event with him, they take a little piece out of you in the first round. And I would agree with you. For the Rangers, Montreal, Columbus, Pittsburgh, they're all really good teams. They almost don't deserve a matchup as ugly as what they've drawn, right?
Yeah, it's just the way the playoff situation is in the National Hockey League right now. And I always, you know, there have been people who have been crying out for change, and I wouldn't mind going back to the 1-8, but I would say this, that these things are cyclical, and this year the Metropolitan Division is the real bear. A couple of years back, the Central Division was a really, really tough division. It changes over time. The teams change. Who knows if it'll be the same next year. The bottom line for me is that the Capitals have drawn well here in terms of their bracket. I think that they're a deeper group than they've ever been. The addition of Shattenkirk gives them even more depth on defense. I like that Trotz has kind of leaned on his third and fourth lines a little bit more this year. There's a little less ice time per game for the big stars, and I think that helps the team become a team, and I think it helps those role players really define those roles and be expected to play in different situations in the game, and also take some of the load off the Ovechkins, the Backstroms, and the guys at the top of that lineup. So I think the Capitals are a more complete group than they've ever been. And, it's kind of a situation, Nestor, when what I would have to say, if not now, when? Because this team, with the free agents that are going to likely move, or there's going to be changes, this is not going to be quite the same deep group next year as it'll be this year. So they're all in. It's right there for them. And I think, as you point out, the biggest thing is the Capitals. I think their toughest opponent might just be their own history and their own franchise history there. So that'll be the thing to watch, but I do think it sets up nicely for them.
As much as some of the fans are puckered up a little bit, I'm greeting this with incredible enthusiasm, EJ. I watched down the stretch, and I've cleared my calendar into the middle of June, just to make sure that whenever, I've got enough points to get myself to places, and I'm hoping for a little Madison Square Garden jaunt at some point through this, and I know Columbus and Pittsburgh are awaiting, but I'm going up to Toronto next week. Tell me what I'm going to find up there. I mean, dude, you're as old school hockey as I can imagine. You've seen these kind of matchups in rinks back when you were on the beat up in New York, throughout Canada. The Toronto Maple Leafs, if it happens to be 1-1 or even 2-0 and the Caps win games 1 and 2, what am I going to see on Monday night in Toronto? Feels to me like that's going to be kind of special, even for a guy like me. I've never seen a playoff game in Canada.
Yeah, I think that the fans in Toronto will be excited. I mean, they have not had a lot of playoff success in many years now. Their last foray into the postseason ended really as badly as you could have a series end, with a 4-1 lead with 10 minutes to go in a game 7, and they blew the lead and lost the game in overtime to the Boston Bruins. So that there is some memories of that certainly for the fans. Not too many of the players, because they've changed over that roster quite a bit. But the fans there will be excited. I mean, let's face it, this is gravy for the Leafs. They weren't expecting to make the playoffs this year. It's been a fantastic season. They're led by a great franchise player rookie in Austin Matthews. Fun players in William Nylander and Mitch Marner. They're not as great on defense. Their goaltender has been dinged up a little bit, but he's played in big games, Freddie Anderson, and he's won big games. So, he's a little bit of a wild card here. The place, the fans will be jumping, and it'll depend upon how the Leafs are able to do. I mean, I would just say that, for the Washington Capitals to overlook the Leafs would be foolish. I don't think they're going to do that. They've played them 3 times this year, and I think the matchup to look back at is the one in early January when the Caps rallied to beat the Leafs in overtime in a very exciting game and an entertaining game. I think there's a chance to have some of those style games in this series, but I think for the Washington Capitals, again, as a favorite and with that history, they've got to just be able, when that boat starts rocking, and no matter who you play, Nestor, it rocks, just find a way to settle themselves, calm themselves, try to play with the lead, and push the inexperienced Leafs into a corner. I think that's what will happen, but it will be, the Leafs, it's a young group that has nothing really to lose. Nobody expected them to be there this year, and so they'll be dangerous because of that.
He is EJ Radick. He covers all things NHL, the NHL Network. You can follow him out on Twitter at EJ Radick _NHL. That's HRADEK. No one does it better. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, I think for anybody sort of new to the party, and I get a lot of people in my life, EJ, that say, well, I really don't watch hockey during the year. If it's on in the corner, but once the playoffs start, I'm coming all in. I think they're going to find a different version of the Columbus Blue Jackets than maybe, your father's version, where they couldn't get out of their own way for a decade and a half, stumbling around. A lot different, I think, than the Nashville Predators and some of their contemporaries. But they're a pretty good team. I mean, the Caps played them 2 weeks ago. I watched it and I said, wow, they've really come a long way. And maybe it's the Tortorella effect. But to me, they're a dangerous team. They played some great hockey when they were on that run a couple of months ago.
Yeah, they are a dangerous team. They're a big group. They want to play physical. They roll their 4 lines, so they're coming at you shift after shift. They've got a terrific young defense. They got some good news as they prepare for the playoffs. Zach Werenski is back in practice. He was injured in that game against the Capitals when Alex Ovechkin lowered the boom on him in the corner, but he seems like he's close to getting back. If they have him back in Game 1, and it looks like that'll be the case, that's a big plus. He's a rookie defenseman, and it's, usually you say rookie defenseman, that they're, those guys can be exploited, but this kid is something special. He was a first-round draft pick, went to the University of Michigan for a year, came out, went and played in the American League last year, helped the Jackets American League affiliate win the Calder Cup at that level, and he's come in and been great this year. If it hadn't been such an unbelievable rookie class with the likes of Austin Matthews and Patrick Laine, he'd probably be a front runner for the Calder Trophy. But he's a key back there. Seth Jones is terrific, and then behind them, you have Sergei Bobrovsky, who may be the best goaltender in the league right now. So the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to be a handful. It'll be interesting to see how they match up with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They played in the playoffs a couple of years ago. This wasn't as good a Columbus team then. They gave the Penguins some trouble in that series. That building gets rocking. It gets loud in there. I just think that's going to be a heck of a series. And, for the Penguins, if they're at full strength, I still think the Penguins were the team to beat. But without Letang, it makes them vulnerable, and I think they'll find a way to beat Columbus, Nestor, but I think it's going to be awfully difficult.
The hockey gods love it when the Rangers and the Canadiens get together, right? I mean, I know you're going to try to sneak over to the Garden to maybe catch Game 3 or Game 4. Some thoughts about that matchup, because the Boston-Ottawa thing's going to kind of be shelved a little bit, but, the Rangers and the Canadiens are going to get an easier team, allegedly, if they get through this first round. But this thing has all the smells of a 6 or a 7 rounder, right?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, on paper, I think the Rangers are a better team, but I'm not going to pick them. I'm going to pick the Montreal Canadiens to win the series because I think Carey Price is one of those guys that gets into the shooter's head, and he's playing well again. And under Claude Julien, this team is now kind of shut down the middle. They don't play really all that exciting style, but they've gotten a little bit bigger with the acquisitions they've made, and they just find ways to win. To be honest with you, Nestor, I don't love their team, but they're a team that's set up nicely. They're in a weaker pool in terms of their division. They're a very good team in the New York Rangers, but the Rangers have had a lot of struggles over the last several weeks of the season. It's hard to say you're going to turn on a switch. They played 3 times this year. Montreal won all 3. The Canadiens are just a team that's, like I say, they just seem to find ways to win. I think the Rangers are better. I think the Rangers should win, but I think the Montreal Canadiens will end up winning the series.
I'm going up to the hockey hotbed of Toronto on Monday, and when I get there, 5 teams, and when I turn my passport in at the Peace Bridge, will be involved. This is good for business, right? It's good for Canada. It's good for hockey. It's good for your network. I think all the way around, there is some mojo into this tournament for Canada, right?
Well, from a Canadian standpoint, for sure. I mean, last year from a TV angle, it was very difficult for Sportsnet, who was the major rights holder. In Canada, they had no Canadian teams in the postseason, and ratings suffer in those circumstances. And they ended up making a lot of changes to their staffing there. So I mean, these things can have an impact that go far beyond just what we see on the ice. But certainly times are better up in Canada this year. 5 teams are in, and really a lot of great stories when you think of Connor McDavid, his first playoffs in Edmonton, Austin Matthews, his first playoffs in Toronto. Calgary's got a handful of really talented young players. The Canadiens with Carey Price, and the Ottawa Senators, who, I'll tell you what, one of the real surprise teams for me this year. I did not think that team could clean up their defensive problems as well as they have. Got to give Guy Boucher, the new head coach there, and his associate coach Mark Crawford, a lot of credit. They've got some underrated players, and then they've got Erik Karlsson, who is just a magical guy at defense that really leads them back there. And they have another great story with Craig Anderson battling through the season in goal with his wife dealing with cancer, which has just been a real battle and a struggle for that family. So, there's a lot of storylines in Canada. It should be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think of those teams. I think certainly Montreal, I already told you. I think Ottawa's got a chance to get through the first round. I think the Edmonton Oilers are in a good situation. So there's some teams that have a chance to really make even a push further into the playoffs.
Blackhawks, though, right out west, it's difficult to eliminate them, as we've learned, right?
Yeah, they're the favorite in the West. This is a team, I think their deep is deeper as a whole than it was when they won the Cup in 2015. So that should tell you something. They've got that great core there that's still, maybe not like a Duncan Keith, maybe not his absolute prime of his career, but still very, very effective. The same can be said for Brent Seabrook. They're deeper on defense. I think Joel Quenneville won't have to. In 2015, he basically rolled three and a half defensemen to win a Stanley Cup. I think this year he'll have more room with some younger players and some additional guys they've brought in. That'll help them there. The emergence of Artemi Panarin has been a big plus offensively for them. Joel Quenneville, not many people do it better behind the bench than him. Kays, Kane, Hosa, that group up front. So they're going to be hard to beat. I would tell you this, the team that could be a fly in the ointment in the West is the Nashville Predators. The Predators have given the Blackhawks some trouble in previous playoff series, and I think this Predators team is probably their best team on paper going into the postseason. So I'll be very curious. That's an area where I wouldn't be shocked if Nashville were to pull an upset there. I'll pick the Hawks. I think the Hawks and the Ducks are clearly, for me, the top teams in the Western Conference. But the Nashville Predators are kind of a wild card, so I'll be curious to see how that plays out in round number one.
EJ, last thing for you on a national level, and, my relationship with Trotz has been 30 years now, and, he and I get together and we talk, and, I get some great insights into stuff, but I am a little bit blinded by him, right, because I've known him for so long and followed him around Nashville all those years, and, for him to get his name on the cup, he's the best coach that hasn't won, right, and maybe that's harder for the Caps fans to understand because they didn't live through 15 years of fang fingers and low payrolls down in Nashville like I did and watched it all unfold. From the outside, looking at Trotz, he's the most capable guy here that just hasn't gotten it done yet, right?
Well, I would say a previous coach in Washington might be the best coach that's never won based on his win-loss record, and that's Bruce Boudreau because, he's done nothing but have success in the regular season. It's mind-boggling, his win-loss record in the regular season. But I would say Barry is right in that same category, and he's done a terrific job. He made a lot out of not as much, as you point out, in Nashville. He's certainly got the horses here in Washington. I think he learned a little bit about his group and maybe about what it will take last season. I think he needs to have a little bit more confidence in some of his back-end players, and particularly one guy I would circle is Dmitry Orlov because this game is such a fast game now. This is a young guy that has a lot of upside to his game. Does he make mistakes? Yes. But he can be a difference maker, and I think he's one of those guys that you have to maintain confidence in and keep building him up. And I think Barry understood that from last year. I think that's one of those lessons moving forward. He's a smart guy. He's been around this game a long time, Barry Trotz. He's certainly deserving of raising that Stanley Cup. I'd be thrilled for him just because he's been a hockey lifer and a guy that's really worked his way to the position he's in now. But I think he did learn a little bit about his group last year. Brian McClellan has made some great additions. It's right there for them, Nestor. It's really right there for them, but they will have to, like I always say, when the boat starts rocking, they will have to find a way to calm the ship. And if they can do that, they can win the Stanley Cup.
He is EJ Radick, _NHL out on Twitter, as well as at the NHL Network and NHL Now. You got that picture with the Stanley Cup. I've broadcasted with the cup. The one thing I've not done is drank champagne out of the cup. And Trotzy and I have a little blood agreement here. He has a bottle of Tom Ebright's champagne from the second Calder Cup in Portland, Maine. That should have been the Baltimore Skipjacks Cup here in Baltimore. It's been in his office and in storage down in Nashville for 23 years now, I think. So it's not going to taste very good. He said it was a $4 bottle of Cook champagne, but we're gonna sample that and whatever Montezuma's revenge that comes afterward. But EJ, I got a lot riding on this, man. So it's got to happen now. And the worst part is everybody we talk to says it's kind of this year or not because this thing is going to get busted up with the salary cap. And as we see the Joe Louis Arena go by the wayside, the Red Wings would have won forever if they could have spent the most money, right? The salary cap is the great equalizer here.
Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. The salary cap has changed the game, and it's even the playing field for a lot of the teams. And you're right. If you're able to keep all those great players that they've drafted and give the Washington Capitals scouting staff a great, pat on the back because, not every pick hits. But they've drafted very well over the years, and they've a lot of their core guys are guys they've drafted and developed. So we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be interesting, but you're right. I think it's kind of, if it's not now, when? Because next year the team will look different. It'll be competitive, but I don't think it'll be as strong as it is right now.
The nerves are rattled, EJ, and I am not growing a playoff beard because I look too damn ugly. And I'm figuring Ovechkin would look like a garden gnome by June 10th. So I'm hoping to see just how ugly this group can get over the next 8 weeks. Thanks for coming on with me and giving me a little preview. We'll be watching out at the NHL Network and following you on Twitter. It's the best time of the year.
Thanks, Nestor.
And I hope you get some rest. You'll be up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching some triple overtime game from Edmonton or Anaheim. Because it's going to happen. Overtime happens in the NHL play. It's exciting. If you're not on the bandwagon, jump on it. Follow EJ Radic _NHL out on Twitter as well. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I'll be up late. I'll be in Toronto next week. And, of course, the morning newspaper will be coming early, 7 a.m. It hits your email inbox. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the bikini shape that you need to be in. We had some good weather this week, melting the ice. He had the steam on the ice at the Royal Farms Arena if this were going on in old skipjacks or bandits days. The last but never least, breaking news happens first on your WNST tech service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you ready for the weekend. The Orioles headed off to Toronto this weekend after a couple days in Boston. We're previewing all things Wizards, Caps, Ravens draft possibilities coming your way. Some good programming around here. And if you miss any of it, go find it in that buyatoyota.com audio vault. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We're waiting for the NFL schedule next week as well. We've got our London trip on sale. We're offering $100 off for anybody that wants to go to London with us. And we're waiting on Green Bay, Nashville, Minnesota, and, of course, the Raiders. Big road trips this year. You'll learn more about that under the Road Trips tab at WNST.net. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 in WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.